Hey everyone, and welcome back to Kauai, Hawaii. I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. We haven't been here in months now, and I've taken some time to completely remove all of our animals from before, and then we'll put them back in here with a few alterations, of course, better than ever. First thing we'll add today will actually be two habitats, one for the Dilophosaurus, and then another mixed habitat right next to them with a few small animals. Going to try to keep this under 20 minutes, so let's start rebuilding this park in Jurassic World Evolution 3. I've skipped over what may be the more boring part of starting any of these parks with the basic park management buildings in our main hatchery, and it's here that we'll kick off rebuilding the park. With the new glass pieces we recently got to Evolution 3, I wanted to build some more transparent walls and barriers in a few spaces in the park now. It obviously doesn't make sense for every animal, but for some of these smaller ones, I think it works pretty well. Especially the Jurassic Park variant of the Dilophosaurus. Jurassic Park has Dilophosaurus that spit venom, which is really cool, but not scientifically backed. Regardless, since I am aiming for a safer experience for our guests in this park, the glass becomes a necessary piece to both give our guests visibility and prevent them from being spat at, which is ideal. I'll use a couple of different glass pieces throughout this. Actually, I think I might use every type of glass in this video. But regardless, as per what I typically end up doing, we won't have the traditional viewing gallery for these animals. We have enough glass panels along this wall that the building becomes less necessary, and I'll have some additions later here to help with the animal visibility. Next time, I think I will end up using one viewing gallery for another carnivore that I'm really excited to get to, but first we need to take some time and get this area of the park built. So this circular structure here is going to be partially for animal visibility along the perimeter, and then the interior of this will be more office space and administrative buildings that guests won't be accessing. Hawaii starts out as a research location for breeding animals, so we'll still keep a little bit of that vibe here with some additional research buildings around the park. One thing that has been really nice to see as I've rebuilt these parks is that the complexity meter has become less of a problem than it previously was. I'm not sure if that's just because I've been more intentional with the pieces I use, or if Frontier figured out how to allow console players to make more complex parks, but regardless, it has been a refreshing change to not stress over the meter the past few months. I went back and forth on actually putting a building inside this structure, but in the end I decided to omit it. Part of this is because I can keep this really nice yellow circle under the building, but also I don't have a great reason or need to add something here that would also only have staff entering it. There are a few buildings in the park that I still don't understand why exactly guests want to go into, like the hatchery, but maybe it's got some cool baby animals or other things inside that I'm missing. Regardless, I chose to spend my limited time decorating a shell of a building, and you know what? It was worth it for me. We'll add a few small pieces of decoration around the perimeter of the building, and then I'll come back here a few times as I feel stuck building this section of the park. Rather than just trying to power through everything every time I get stuck, I find having something like this I can go back to occasionally helps me recharge and keep going even when buildings can get a bit frustrating. Okay, so for some of the dinosaur visibility, we're going to add in the hotel for this part of the park. And for this, I'm using this building from the Honolulu Zoo as inspiration behind the design. I don't normally use other buildings as much inspiration. I kind of just build what I'd want to see somewhere, but I was pretty stuck trying to figure out something based around Hawaii and felt like I needed some help here. It was fun to use these glass pieces. I don't use them very much myself in other buildings, but once you lighten them up a little bit, I think they actually look pretty nice in the sunlight. The original color of these pieces of glass just feel too dark for most things I'd like to build, and little things like that definitely have deterred me from utilizing pieces in the past. This is a very loose interpretation of the building in Hawaii. Not actually sure what the original purpose of the building I looked up was, to be honest, but I really liked building this very bright hotel, or bright for me at least, and using more of these new coastal pieces to put it together. We got a ton of cool building pieces in this last DLC, and at least for me, that helped make it feel worth the price. Once we're done here, I'll put the workshop code up here as well, so if you'd like to use this in your own build or park, go for it. And while you're at it, if you've made it this far into the video and like what you're seeing, definitely let me know by simply pressing that like button. If you'd like to support the channel even more, we have that really cool subscribe button you can push as well. Always appreciate the love and the support while I continue to update these parks and then move on to some other things within the Jurassic World 3 universe. Anyways, we're just adding some of the frills and railings on the other details around the hotel now that will help it feel a little bit more realistic. At this point, I more so just go down the list of sections of building pieces and figure out if or what would make sense for this building. It's part of the whole motif now where I start a concept or idea and then I don't fully think it through. That way I don't get incredibly frustrated when it doesn't look perfect, but also I get to be entertained and surprised sometimes at what the finished product looks like. Is this how everyone else builds, or do you consider another strategy? I have no idea. But I'm definitely trying to get better at this, so if you have any ideas or suggestions or tips on how to make these even better, I'm always open to the feedback, so definitely feel free to let me know down in the comment section. One thing I could use feedback on, if you made it this far, is the overall name of the park. So each of these parks needs a name, and I'm at a loss here with what to really call this. I've temporarily called this the Kauai Zoo, because this is as vanilla and safe as I can make it. If it stays here, I wouldn't be mad, but I definitely feel like there is something better to call in this park. We'll see. Hopefully in the coming weeks that name evolves. Okay, so we've got the overall shape of this first one down, so we can add the Dilophosaurus to our park. So while we get this bit of the park wrapped up, let's talk about the real Dilophosaurus. So first of all, Dilophosaurus was pretty big, roughly 20 feet or so long. The movie version made the Dilophosaurus quite a bit smaller, which is what we have in the park here, but the real animal was a legit early Jurassic predator. We already mentioned the venom earlier, but basically everything you remember about Dilophosaurus from Jurassic Park is kind of made up. There isn't a ton of evidence around those things. We don't know that Dilophosaurus had those frills, but what Dilophosaurus actually had were those incredible double crests on its skull. That's literally where its name comes from, as the two-crested lizard. Those crests were probably used for display rather than combat, which makes me think that this is going to be one of the more visibly or visually interesting animals in the park. We're going to use the rebirth skin on a few of them as well, which will make it more vibrant in the color patterns and should add some intrigue to the animal. Dilophosaurus lived 193-ish million years ago in what is now the American Southwest, making it one of the earliest large predators of the Jurassic. But today, we're giving it a completely different home and bringing Dilophosaurus to our Kauai park. I don't feel like there's a ton of dinosaurs that actually came from Kauai or Hawaii, so we're going to use a lot of liberty in putting this together here. There's a few small things we want to clean up here. We're going to add a fence around the perimeter here of this over here with this this glass fence here, and then a few things on the top of it before we start moving on and getting closer to our next enclosure. I do like the idea of having some thicker gates and barriers in some parts of the park, so between the Dilophosaurus and the other enclosure, I wanted to build a simple staff walkway and a security gate. That way staff can monitor this gate between the animals and also observe the Dilophosaurus from a safer distance. I do have a gate up closer to the hatchery in the Dilophosaurus enclosure that staff will use to get all the way over here, but there won't be another gate within the second enclosure for animals or staff to enter. Everything is going to come through that main gate. We've got a substation right behind the hotel that is hidden from the main path and touches some of the pylons and main power of the park, so everything here will still turn on. It's a shame we can't use stairs in this game, but I did my best to try to make this appear like staff would use it, to look over both enclosures. It actually was really fun to make this little prop of the park and take some time to slow myself down before moving on to that second enclosure. It started out with just a very simple stairs, and then it elevated into the walkway, and then I started adding a few of those other details as they made sense to me. So we've got simple lights in the entrance, we have larger lights up the stairs, I even added a few crates and facility props to the top of the gate, and the last thing we add the signs and the banners, and once we get a few of these in, we can finally move on to the second enclosure. So the last bit here is going to be the home of 3 animals that I've never used in this game, so it's actually my first time seeing them myself. All 3 are herbivores. Obviously, I'm not going to put a carnivore in a dinosaur encounter like this, but they don't all normally get along as well as we want, so we give them plenty of room to claim their territory and cohabitate as best as they can. I've already used a lot of concrete in this building, and I've rarely used this bit of fossil that we have here for the parks, and was determined to find a spot for it, so we're going to put that in part of the wall here. You'll see it as you're walking into the dinosaur encounter, and I thought it worked pretty well. I would like to get better at using those pieces. I struggle to find a spot where I feel like they make sense, but here is the one spot that I have put it in any of these parks. So Hopefully you like that, and if you do, you have one spot in a park for this little piece of prop. The interior of the space is pretty standard. I don't want to make it overly flashy and bright. I'd much rather it be functional, so we'll just put a few planters and shelves around here that would hold boxes or whatever you need to feed these animals that come into the area. A couple small railings between the guests and these bushes on the side to reduce the walking area for guests here. And then once we get the foliage in and a couple of tables to sit down, I think we're getting close to filling this area up. I didn't want to add too much here, so we have enough room for guests to pop in here and pet the animals, and feel like we have a good balance here between making this area feel not too empty, but also not incredibly busy, and like we just threw a ton of things in here together. The dinosaur encounter can get a little dark, so we'll have a few of these little torches in here to give us some light there, but then also on the roof of this, we're going to have some breaks in our concrete panels here where we'll have a few of those traditional glass panels going. It isn't going to let in a ton of light, but it is just enough so that we aren't walking into absolute darkness here. I added a very simple orb to the top of this as well, with some paneling on the sides to help smooth out the transition between the glass and the concrete. I think this is the last of the glass we use in this build, but we've got plenty of concrete to keep adding. I'm going to get carried away at some point talking about the animals that will be in this enclosure, so I'm just going to get ahead of that now so I don't run up on time. I mentioned earlier we're going to have a mix of animals here that don't always get along, but somehow we manage to keep them all adequately happy with each other. First off, we'll add Desmatosuchus. Now, these guys aren't actually dinosaurs. Desmatosuchus was part of the ancient reptile group that's related to modern crocodilians. It lived in the late Triassic around 220 million years ago, so we're going way back in time for this one. Desmatosuchus had rows of bony plates along its body, and some of those plates turned into these huge spikes around its shoulders. Desmatosuchus is also the best part and worst part of this enclosure because they actually don't get along with either of the other animals in this enclosure. They dominate the majority of the territory. They're easiest to find here, while the other two fill in on both sides of them. One of those is Aqualops. This is the first time we actually get a dinosaur in here. Aqualops was a tiny early ceratopsian. Most people became familiar with them after the last Jurassic World film, and as you'll see in at least a few shots today, Aqualops was absolutely tiny, at only around 2 feet long. Its name literally means eagle face, referring to its beak-like skull, and they're pretty small and hard to find, so rather than making them the main event of its own enclosure, I elected to share a larger enclosure and just occasionally make them present. Last, we've got Minmi, the small Australian ankylosaur. Basically a little walking tank. It was around 10 feet long, covered in armor. It was built much more for defense than speed. We finished up much of the top of this building with some of the props and items for staff that will need to come up here to do maintenance or whatever they do. But I also want to flag that I did include in this part of the park a restaurant built not by myself, but by Bob Jalou, the name on the screen right now with this image here. So huge shout out to you for your restaurant because it looks absolutely phenomenal. I've added to this bit of the park. Definitely want to make sure you get all the credit for any time it pops up on the screen because you 100% deserve it. This is a great job putting something together. We're going to add a few things around the perimeter here. Once I'd started doing things with the Dilophosaurus, I realized I wanted to try to get some of these perimeter gates and barriers really close to the actual path here. So I played with that a little bit. It was incredibly time consuming, but I feel like it was worth it to make this look a little bit nicer on the edge of this here. And then we used a lot of arid sand to put this together on the base of everything and then added the foliage on top of it. Which again, I'm trying to get better at a few of these things, but I did feel like it came together pretty nicely when it all came together. So we've got 3 animals here that couldn't be more different. Desmatosuchus is a Triassic armored reptile, Aqualops is a tiny early horned dinosaur, and Minmi is a Cretaceous armored dinosaur from Australia. These animals never actually shared an ecosystem or even lived in the same area, but that's the fun of these parks. We create our own prehistoric zoo right here on Kauai. But this will wrap up this part of the park today. Again, thanks for watching, liking, subscribing. I'm getting started on the next attraction in the park now, but until then, enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you on the next build.